Greetings duelists and welcome to another video. So today I kind of want to talk about a very important card right now, and that card is Artifact Lancea. So yesterday when I went to my locals, I took the Chaos Valkyria Malice deck, and I thought to myself, maybe it's not a bad idea if I main deck Artifact Lancea. At the end, I kind of opted against it because I did not know how popular certain decks were like at my locals. And to my surprise, a lot of decks that really get hurt by Lancea were at the tournament. We're talking about Flounderies, we're talking about Dinosaurs, we're talking about Malice, we're talking about Voiceless Voice. All those decks really get crippled by Lancea, and most of them actually did top like our tournament yesterday. So as I kept thinking about it, I was telling myself maybe Lancea is not a bad idea in the main deck. And when I thought about Lancea, I thought about what applications does Lancea have that are very useful in the game right now. I thought about stuff like SP Little Knight. I thought about stuff like Crossout Designator. Some Raizio builds are playing Pot of Desires, so that's one card I thought about. There is Called by the Grave, which is pretty much a detriment to other hand traps. And I kept thinking more and more along the lines. Like there's Kashtira Unicorn that is in a couple of decks. There's Access to Talker that's being summoned in a few decks also. Like, I just kept thinking Lancea is going to be more and more impactful than people think. Not to the degree that it is with something like Dimension Shifter. Dimension Shifter is still a way more impactful card than Lancea. However, Lancea actually does a lot against a lot of decks right now. And the other thing about Lancea is that Lancea is also future-proof. But let's talk about it a little bit more by segments. The first segment that I already brought up is the utility behind other already useful cards in the format. SP Little Knight, Crossout, Ghost Sarcophagus, Allure of Darkness. Like all these cards, actually gets shut down by Lancea, and it's very, very important to take note of that because let's say, for example, you're playing a hand trap war against your opponent is hand trapping you with other cards like Nibiru or Imperm, and then you just want to cross out those cards, and then they chain Lancea. Then your cross out gets shut down, and your opponent got to resolve their hand trap. Same thing goes with Call by the Grave. Like, if you try to Call by the Grave a hand trap and they just Lancea you, that's it for the call by. That hand trap resolves and you just got blown out. And if you're playing something like Malice, it just gets even worse. Now that I talked about that, let's talk about the actual decks in the format. Or the actual rogue decks and the other decks that are not playable anymore. I already talked about Flounderies, and I talked about a few other decks, but other miscellaneous decks is like Tri-Brigade. Tri-Brigade completely gets shut down by Lancea. It's a card that is pretty much a game ender for this strategy. This strategy revolves a lot around banishing your cards, so that's very, very sad for them. Invoked is another deck that actually gets shut down. You cannot Invocation, at least for using Alistair, unless it's from the hand, if you're under Lancea. So that's actually also very game ending. The Chimera deck plays Sinister Necrom, and that's again another thing that to consider. Phantom Knights has not been relevant in years, but in the OCG, I have been seeing the Materia Reactor Goblin Biker deck actually popping off in a few tournaments, and those decks do play the Phantom Knight engine. So Lancea is just another really great utility card against them. I already brought up Voiceless Voice. Like, you cannot ritual summon using Saphira under Lancea, and that is a very key play that the deck has. It also shuts down Dogmatica Maximus, which is like another card that you can play with the voiceless cards. Like here it is. Dogmatic Maximus cannot be summoned if you're under Lancea. And I have seen voiceless decks playing the Dogmatica engine a lot, so that is something to take consideration. Let's talk about Ryugi and dinosaurs and worms. Like, I'm going to talk about these two together because they're both part of the Ryugi strategy. Ryugi is another new deck that just got debuted alongside Malice and Ryziel, and sadly, it just ended in collateral damage because Lancea shuts down the Ryugi Warzone, and this is the best card in the deck. Like, and it gets even worse because in Supreme Darkness, Tenji is getting more support with Tenji Spirit Surya and with a few other cards. And like seeing that this deck is debuting new cards in Supreme Darkness and just knowing that there's a card that actually shuts down the archetype is actually a little sad to see. So like it's very tough to see if Tenjis can actually perform well. Dragon Link is another deck that is actually decent right now. I've been seeing Fiendsmith versions of Dragon Link popping off, and again, this is another archetype that just gets hurt by Lancea as well. Let's see. Now that we talked about a few of the already contending decks, there's also Orchest. Orchest is another deck that also got hurt by them. Chaos-based decks, you already saw my Malice deck yesterday. If you did. If you haven't, you should check it out. Really cool deck. Sadly, another victim for Lancea. Okay, now let's talk a little bit more about the future. I guess another deck I kind of want to talk about before we talk about future support, and I will be like segueing into the future now. Sadly, Ritual Beast is unplayable under Lancea. Like, the format before this one was really good for Ritual Beast. The deck was really good against like a lot of oppressive cards in the game. And it was a shifter deck, so it was another thing that gave it a very strong edge. It also played the Nemesis cards, which also falls to Lancea. So it's very sad that I cannot play this deck anymore. At least not in a competitive level without worrying about like hard counters to it. Now that we can transition and we can talk about other future support. In Supreme Darkness, we're getting Abaoku with the Lightless Shadow. This is a very, very good Link monster, and one of the key plays with this card is reborning cards from your graveyard, but you have to banish it in order to do that. So Artifact Lancea also shuts down this card, and you have to discard for cost. So like the effort that you're making into making Abaoku just gets diminished if your opponent resolves Lancea on you. You can still use the destruction effect, but again, that's not the whole point of this card. Like the main selling point behind this card is the fact that you can reborn other monsters. There is a future Malice profile I will showcase with this card, a future combo that is actually really cool. Well, it's kind of toxic, but it's also kind of cool. But we'll talk about that another time. So Gem Knights. Gem Knights is getting future support in the second version of Terminal's Revenge, which most likely gonna be happening mid next year. And that's another strategy that cannot play well because of Lancea. Jurak is also getting support in the same set. Same thing with Necros. Necros is also getting support like in the future. And like the fact that almost every archetype in the dual terminal world theme, it gets like hurt by Lancea a lot, is actually not favorable for these decks. They're probably not gonna be able to keep up with like Malice and with Ryziel because of that. Another strategy that's also getting future support and is actually very decent support is Dragon Rulers. We just got the Dragon Rulers Unlimited, and they just showcased new support for them. But Dragon Rulers are in a rough spot right now because this is a heavy engine deck. Like there's no real way for you to build Dragon Rulers without committing too much of your engine, like playing with other dragons, etc. And again, the Artifact Lancea is just going to be a card that just really cripples this deck wholeheartedly. So yeah, I think you're getting the gist of it. Artifact Lancea, and let's just talk about Iron Wall and Chaos Hunter. I think these cards will be in the meta someday. Like, I think as more time progresses, these cards will be played alongside Lancea. But yeah, I just feel like there are so many cool decks that I really like in the game, and some of my most favorite decks right now are just unplayable because of this card. And I kind of just wanted to talk about this because people eventually will catch on to this, and as long as this card is in the game, well, Malice won't be the best deck. Like, it will always be second to third place, and unless we actually get very good counters to this card, or we actually get like other strategies that just make this card not be as playable, it's just going to be sad to know that, yeah, this card is pretty much here to stay. It's probably going to be around for the entirety of 2025. But yeah, I hope you found this video informative and to your liking and understanding. There are so many other decks that I could have talked about, like for example, Rescue Ace is another unplayable deck because of this card. But I just wanted to make it short and sweet. I think you got the gist of it. Yeah, just watch out for this card. Like, it will get to a point where people will think about this card not as badly as Dimension Shifter, but just as a thorn in the side for a lot of fun strategies. Yeah, that's pretty much it. Hope you. I'm just rambling at this point, so keep practicing and keep dueling.